Welcome to another great episode of Mission Compliance, Unleashing Growth Potential for Defense Contractors. In today's episode, we're tackling physical security. More specifically, physical security and what it means when it comes to NIST SP 800-171. Most people think NIST SP 800-171 is all about IT, but the reality is that can't be farther from the truth. Today, we're going to dive into questions from NIST SP 800-171, Control Family 3.10, which is all about physical security, and we'll be exploring its real-world applications and how it can help your company and what's required for compliance. Boy, that's a mouthful. So whether you're a defense contractor aiming to win more contracts or just wanting to learn more about this compliance stuff, this episode is perfect for you. Let's go. We're joined once again today by Mike Frieder, President of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC Professional Assessor. So Mike, this week we're talking about physical security, as we mentioned, and so let's jump right into that. What are the critical components of physical security in the context of NIST SP 800-171, Control Family 3.10, and how do they contribute to the overall cybersecurity resilience?
Yeah, it's such a good topic and such a great question, Rowan. So I really appreciate you kind of bringing this to the forefront. There is this really big misconception about NIST SP 800-171. This is an IT problem, and it's not. It's not an IT problem at all. In fact, they don't even really refer to this as a cybersecurity standard. This is what is called an information security standard, and therefore it must address more than just the IT, which I think makes it quite interesting. The 3.10 control family is just mission critical to making sure that you can adequately protect controlled unclassified information or anything else you're trying to protect because of the standard. So when it boils down to it, what are the critical components of it? Well, they're not IT related. I mean, generally speaking, they're not IT related. One is, you have to monitor and protect the physical facility. And generally speaking, you can't do that without a camera system. I walk into so many facilities across the country who have CUI out on the shop floors, who have CUI everywhere in the offices. And the reality is they have no actual knowledge, control, or understanding of who is coming in and out of that building, which is so dangerous. And so I think a camera system is one of the many critical components to physical security. Obviously, there's, not just door locks, but a lot of times physical fob systems or access control, or lately it's been biologics, bio locks and things like that. But one way or another, you also have to physically control the premise. You have to be able to make it so that, non-authorized users can't just come in, or at least come into those areas designated for use with CUI. So that's another issue, is the actual sort of lock and key of the place. How do you control physical access? I'll tell you a really quick story. We were at a campus that had about 4,000 people on it, and they only worked with CUI in a couple of the rooms. And they said, well, we don't want to have to train all 3,000 or 4,000 people on our campus. That's really ridiculous. And I said, well, here's the problem. All 3,000 or 4,000 people on this campus can move freely, and they can come right into this room where this military work is going on. It's unacceptable. They either have to be trained on how to handle it and be made aware that it's here, or you need to access restrict the room. And they said, well, it's $10,000 a door or whatever it is to put in a gate, an access system. I said, well, if you want to continue doing defense work and you don't want to spend the man hours to train 4,000 people, I guess you're putting in, a key fob system on these doors. And I think it just really speaks to how important it is to understand what it is you're dealing with. If that CUI has to be left alone and isn't going to be escorted or physically protected by a human, then the reality is that area needs to be somehow sequestered or somehow locked down. So I think that's another really strong consideration right there with the camera system, is who has physical access to the CUI. And if that's everybody's got to be trained, period. Everybody's got to be an authorized user. And, in some circumstances, that just won't work. Particularly when there's large amounts of people in and out of the building. Another aspect is, and this is one of my favorite ones, we talk about warehouses and manufacturing facilities that have these lift gates or these sort of giant bay doors, and they're left open during seasons of good weather. hey, you think maybe that's no big deal, but the reality is that that's a big giant gaping hole in your building, and it certainly isn't secure. And so you've got to be able to protect that. And we created a way of doing that. We didn't create the way, but we sort of created a way of solving that control, which is considered acceptable, which is you can use a scissor gate, right? You can still have the door open so you can get the airflow, daylight, etc. That's another issue. Some of these places just don't have windows, so they open up the doors just so they can see to the outside and have a little bit of natural light. Okay, fine. You've still got to make it so someone can't just come walking into that facility, which is a great challenge. So there's a lot of challenges when it comes to physical facility, but most importantly, the big challenge is what people are used to doing or the status quo. And that's going to have to change. If you're getting into defense work, or if you've been here for a while, but you've never had to comply with NIST SP 800-171 prior to 2017, the reality is that you're going to need to do this. You're going to need to control how people come and go from your building. Cameras to monitor that. You're also going to have logs at all of the entrances where a guest may potentially come in, or where you have an open door. So a lot of our clients put visitor logs into the lobby. And that's another thing that I think really has to be, sort of implemented is you need to have a visitor log, you need to know why they're there, and then that visitor must be assigned an escort. Because again, we have another rule elsewhere in NIST SP 800-171, which is that people who are visitors must be escorted at all times. The time to properly escort that visitor is going to be when that visitor is entering the building and they are logging in, or in other words, literally physically logging in via a visitor log. So I think visitor logs are extremely important. And then I think the other aspect is individually controlled access. So when it comes to sensitive security areas, great example is the server room. Okay, almost every business has a server room where the CUI is stored on those servers digitally, or maybe it's your internet connection. One way or another, that room has to have access control. Now, access control can be as simple as just a different key that only the IT and maybe the executive director have, or whoever's important, but it can also be something much more complicated, like where that room is placed in the building. Do you have biometric locks? You need to be able to know what individuals are going in and accessing CUI, or even devices that hold CUI. You've got to have a grip on that. You've got to have some kind of mechanism that you can describe in a system security plan for that. So those are sort of the basics. And then I think the final thought that I have is on training. Your people need to be trained and aware to recognize and call out anomalous activity. In other words, if you've got a strange person in the building, they need to show some ID, or they need to basically tell you who they are. I can't count the number of facilities that we've been at where there are people that are not in uniform, that are walking around and nobody knows who they are. It's really peculiar. And who do you really think those people are? I mean, well, they could be homeless, but that's probably not what, they're probably a little too neat for that. They could also be an unauthorized user, and God only knows why they are in that facility. Hopefully not to steal some secrets, right? But I think all of that is super relevant. So I think in terms of components, that's a really good baseline for physical security. There's obviously more that we look for. We look for things like, gosh, we look and see, hey, is there scrap? How do you deal with scrap if you're a manufacturer, right? If something doesn't pass quality checks, are you destroying that part? Are you melting it? Or do you throw it away whole with a serial number on it or a part number on it so somebody could potentially recreate that or come pretty close? Those are all very real considerations when it comes to physical security. But that's a good starting answer, I think.
As we mentioned, this is part of the 3.10 control family, and we will get there on our journey with each control, but we are dozens and dozens of episodes from there. So by the time we get there, you'll forget this episode even existed, but we wanted to bring it to your attention now because it's that important. So with that being said, how does the physical security landscape evolve with advancements in technology, and what challenges and opportunities does this present for organizations implementing NIST SP 800-171 controls?
That's a great question. There's been so many innovations in physical security. And I'll just name off a few, but ultimately the great news is it makes it easier to implement NIST. To speak to what you just mentioned, fully recognize that we're like 10 control families away from physical security. We just had some incidents with a client that I can't talk about on air, but I thought to myself, man, I think a lot of the IT requirements are pretty well talked about out there in the marketplace, but I tell you what is not talked about in the marketplace is the physical security. I feel like it's really overlooked. Um, and so as a result, we kind of want to say, let's come to market early with this discussion. Let's talk about physical security a little bit early because I really feel like a lot of people don't do a very good job of addressing physical security when they're talking about the NIST controls. And so as a result, we really like to, kind of emphasize and give it proper weight, versus what the compliance standard does. And I just generally think it's one of the easier ones to shore up. And in some cases, it could take some time if you don't have the right physical safeguards in. So I thought it'd be good to kind of address this early as well. And again, it's a really great topic for a refresher.
Absolutely. You know, security and cybersecurity and technology is always advancing, so physical security needs to advance as well. When we talk about physical security, I think about an actual large couple of large men standing at a door. This was going to be my silly question when we first started talking about this episode, but I didn't even I'm not even going to do it. I just want to mention it because it's funny. Um, One of my favorite shows is Home Improvement, and I was watching an episode last night where Tim, of course, Tim the Toolman Taylor, hurt himself on the job site. He had to go to the hospital, and he kept trying to break out of the hospital um, to go do other things. And at the very end of the episode, he tries to break out of the hospital again, and just as he tries to get out of the bed, one of the largest men I've ever seen just steps into the doorway, and he was like, you know what, I'm good. And so that's what I think about when I think about physical security, is one of the largest men ever just blocking the doorway so no threats can get in. But can you share, you've already done this a little bit, can you share a real world example where a lack of emphasis on physical security has had significant consequences for an organization's cybersecurity, and what lessons can other businesses learn from it?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of go back and make sure I do a thorough job of answering the second question, which is how has it evolved? There's been incredible evolution in security that makes it a lot easier for defense contractors to do this themselves. One example is that you can go to Amazon right now and purchase a key fob system with a 10,000 pound door magnet. Those used to not be for sale to the public. They used to only be for sale to security companies. Now you can actually install that yourself, or you can at least purchase the system, and the systems are very cheap. I mean, you're talking about $1,000 or less. Some cases, up to $1,200, $1,500 for really fancy and large systems. But you can get a door lock system like that for your small to mid-size business for not very much money. You can also, install biometric locks. You can install combination locks with automatic locking sensors and things like that. These are all things that are now available. That are just great. The Ring doorbell is an incredible innovation. Simply Safe, we're huge fans of that because it allows you to do a camera system yourself. It works off your standard network, and it will allow you to adequately monitor a facility. There's so many new innovations in security that allow you to do it yourself that it's just so much easier to comply with this. And yet a lot of people don't do it. And so that's one of the reasons we want to bring some awareness is we think it's just so important for people to understand that they've got to have these things in place. Another one is smart keys. So they now make smart keys where you can actually use a person's phone as the smart key to the lock, making it individually identifiable. And in fact, with multi-factor authentication, physically, identifiable. And that's a really incredible thing too, because now you've really got good security. If somebody doesn't have their phone on them, they can't get in the office or get into the server room. And I think that's a really brilliant solution as well. Now, when we're talking about real world examples, I have some real fun stories, and I have to be very careful because again, we're always under non-disclosure confidentiality statements. But I remember years and years ago, we were actually at a facility and we were kind of walking the facility, doing the walk, and I said, "Hey, you need tinted windows." And they said, "We don't need tinted windows. You can't see anything that's going on there." I said, "Yes, you can." And I said, "I'll prove it." I took them outside of that window to that parking lot, and I said, "How many cameras do you think are pointed at your facility right now, right through this window?" And they said, "None. What are you talking about?" I said, "Every backup camera of every car has the capability to record these days and have somebody sitting in their car that just backed up to the facility and is literally videotaping your entire quality inspection room, which has blueprints of some very sensitive parts. Sure enough, somebody overhears that conversation and freaks out and like peels out of the parking lot, like right in front of us. And I go, what employee was that? Who do you know that person? And the answer was no. And we don't have any answers on whether or not that was, some kind of a spy or something crazy like that. But just that sheer incident is pretty wild.
It happened right in front of you. That's literally like something out of like an episode of NCIS. Like it was just the timing of it is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I'll tell you another story. We were walking around another facility, and there was a random device zip tied to a tree just outside the window of the facility. And I asked the executive director, I said, what's this? And I looked at the bottom of it. I said, dude, there's a network port on this thing. This is an internet connected device, and it had an antenna on it, so I knew it was wireless. And he didn't know what it was. Nobody in the building knew what it was. And I look at my phone and I go, look, this thing's broadcasting as a wireless access point. It's zip tied to a tree. It's broadcasting as a wireless access point. It's crazy. And so I didn't connect to the access point. We ultimately basically disabled the device. I won't go into detail. But the reality is that that device could have been something sitting on their network outside the building that somebody could have been doing data recording. We just don't know. And I think that's another problem is that a lot of times with internet connected devices, you really don't know what they're doing. And I probably, there's numerous cases of us basically walking into larger warehouses and finding homeless people. And there's also tons and tons of stories about, we've had consultants that have, talked to people about physical security. Yeah, everything's in place. Here's what it is. They come for day 2 and our guys just walk right in the giant bay door in the back. Just walk right in, hang out, go explore the building. Nobody's asking who we are. We're just kind of playing it cool. And the reality is that you can walk into a lot of places these days. That's really, it's very interesting. So numerous examples. And then of course there's, more theft examples than I can count that I've been told about. Situations where someone has been stolen from and they have no cameras to actually go back and figure out who it was. Well, if you have defense information that gets stolen from you, it's a complete mess. DoD gets involved. They want to know what you had. They're going to directly ask you, why were you not following NIST? It's a mess. It's a huge mess. And believe me, if you're a defense contractor, you may not think of yourself as a high value target, but I'm sure you've got valuable stuff that people would just love to steal, even if they don't even know what it is. And so I think for that reason alone, you've just really got to do what's in NIST SP 100.1.7 to properly secure yourself. So lots and lots of real world examples there. And again, it's the strange thing to me is physical security really is extremely important, and a lot of people overlook it.
Man, I still can't get over the fact that the car peeled out right as you were talking about it. That's insane to me. Like I would look around in that moment and wonder if I was in some sort of Truman Show situation. Like the whole thing is on TV or something, because the timing of that is just it doesn't feel real. That's crazy.
Yeah, I'll tell you, almost every consultation we go in, there are security issues. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, but because they've never had a standard like this to look at, but there's always something that we find. And sometimes it's really peculiar, but that's the kind of thing that we actually see more often than you would think. If you go to places like the Brooklyn Navy Yard, or you go to places like, the Hampton Roads in Norfolk, Virginia Beach type areas where there's tons and tons and tons of military, those guys are pulling out an outsider, a spy almost every day. It's no joke. And by the way, we do the same thing in other countries, right? Like we constantly have people spying for us and trying to learn what intel they can. And these things happen all the time.
Wow, that is something else.
This would seem really unusual.
Yeah, that is something else. So on that, honestly, so that kind of stuff sounds like a job for a superhero, which leads me to our favorite part of the podcast, which is the silly question. And we love superheroes on this podcast. I've lost count of the amount of times I've seen the original Avengers movie or all three Captain America movies. Or there's a shield on the wall behind Mike there, that On Call made that looks a lot like Captain America's shield. What is that? A letter opener? What am I looking at?
Yeah, I'm like trying to point at it, but the zoom screen thing just kills me every time,
Keeps
right?
disappearing behind the totally real wall that is behind you.
Yeah.
But also
I
I
happen to
have
carry
a
a dagger with me everywhere I go.
but
So
also I have a Superman figurine on my desk. So it's like we love superheroes here. We've had several superhero related silly questions, and today is no different. So if NIST SP 800-171 were a superhero and physical security its sidekick, what would their dynamic duo name be? And what quirky superpowers would they possess to protect the cybersecurity realm?
oh man, this is a good one, Roman. You got me on this one. I did not do any advanced thinking, nor did I see this question in advance. Physical security and what it means. Let's see here. If it was a superhero, okay. If physical security is a sidekick. Um, let's see here. Man, I don't know. Well, the kids they have their Paw Patrol. So maybe between NIST and physical security, it would just be the Information Security Patrol, which is super lame. I just don't have a better answer right
My
now.
my thought is I was thinking either if it's a team of people instead of just a duo, it would be like the cybersecurity squadron. Or if we go, at On Call, we've talked about Captain Compliance before and that kind of thing. It's like it could be Captain Compliance and the Cybersecurity Squadron, or Captain Compliance and Cyberman. Yeah, kind of
But
that's
I
kind
tell you what we should do. You know what? So I happen to love Italian sports cars,
of course you
and
do.
I think that there's so the word squad or team in Italian is squadra. And so also one of my favorite brands, Lamborghini, happens to have a car called the Squadra Corsa, which is a really cool select. It's a Lamborghini Gallardo that they only made a couple of, like 50 of them. And I've been watching some videos on that lately. So maybe we would call this the Squadra Securitio.
Okay.
Squadra Security. There you go.
I think we need to do a follow-up to the Getting to Know You podcast where we just get you on here and you just talk about Italian sports cars and race cars and like just go for it.
Oh man, yeah, there you go. One of these days. If it was only relevant
What
to products. Hey, you know what? I tell you what, if you're listening to this podcast and you'd love to see that, hit us with a comment or like the video or something, and we can have a little bit of fun with that if the audience is into it. Who doesn't love a good Italian
I mean,
sports car?
absolutely. Just the other day, I sent you a picture of I believe it was a Lotus, and we were like, "Oh man, look at this thing." So it was like, yeah, we talk about cars here. It's what we do, and we talk about cars and superheroes, and so that all the more reason why it's perfect that the name that you came up with combines cars and superheroes.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think that would be I think Squadra Security, that would be our jam.
All right. And that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration to navigate the ever evolving world of defense. We'd like to thank Mike for giving us a great set of information and rules on physical security and the importance of not overlooking that when you're talking about security, because we often think about cybersecurity, but sometimes overlook the actual physical premise that your organization is inside. So thanks, Mike, for bringing that to our attention.
Always a pleasure. Yeah, I love doing it.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these topics and connect with us on our social media channels. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms so you always know when new episodes like this one and maybe that part two where Mike talks about sports cars are released. And we truly appreciate it if you could rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought-provoking episodes and high-quality content. Join us next time as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.